Welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. I am one of your hosts, Michael Braithwaite from Blue Door. And as always, I am joined by the wonderfully talented Stefania from CAEH. Steph, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm good. It's October here in Toronto, and it is a little gloomy and rainy. We really hung on for a long time to the summer weather. It seems now in this city that you have about a week and a half from turning off the AC and turning on the heater, which is sad but true. No one will put on a sweater in my house. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's funny. We went very quickly from like relying heavily on an air conditioner, which we had bought for the first time ever this past summer. And now our fireplace is going, our little electric fireplace. So it's kind of the same over here, just like one extreme to another.
I always remember the old school electric fireplaces where they actually had like this little thing turning that made it like the illusion of a fire, and then would make cool crackling noise. Yeah, actually, I don't even think it had any heat. It just, you'd actually put it in the fire where there used to be a wood
setting.
Yeah, it was. It was just
well, that's awesome. Well, I feel like we can go on and on about the weather because I love talking about it as a West Coaster. It's one of our finer talking points. But I would love for you to introduce today's guest.
Well, you could say that wasn't part of the plan to talk about the weather. Speaking of planning, I want to introduce our guest, Dianne Himbeault, who's a professional planner with over 25 years of experience in planning. So Dianne holds a BA from the University St. Boniface and a master's degree in city planning from the University of Manitoba. Dianne has been with CMHC for more than 10 years in a variety of roles and is currently an outreach specialist promoting the National Housing Strategy, which we love here on the show and talk about often, and the transformation of the housing sector into one that is more affordable, sustainable, and accessible. Also things that we love. During her time at CMHC, she has also worked as a senior market analyst, a First Nation housing consultant, and as a senior policy analyst in housing needs. Dianne also spent more than 15 years with the city of Winnipeg, where she held a number of positions, including manager of the Planning and Land Use Division of the Planning, Property, and Development Department. And while working at the city, she gained experience in community development, neighborhood planning, development management, and long-range planning, including managing the development and adoption of our Winnipeg, the city's development plan. Dianne, welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to have you.
Yeah. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Of course, yes, we expect no less. So, Dianne, we've started this new fun kind of ritual, I guess, on the podcast where we are asking the same first question to all of our wonderful guests. And so my question to you is, home means many things to so many people. Can you talk to us a bit about what home means to you?
Sure. It's really important. And as Michael introduced, I am a planner by profession. And in planning, we have the thing we call placemaking. And we usually apply it to, public spaces, but it's very much also, it connects to home because home is a place, but it's also the place that you make, right? It's the place that you bring in the things that you love, the people that you love, and a place that you make into your own and where you can feel secure and surrounded by things that make you happy, right? So that's home being a place that you make and you make it your home. So that's probably what it means to me.
I love that. And I think sometimes often when people say what was home, they talk about the physical structure. It's absolutely what you're not saying is what you make it and what it means to you. And that's incredible. Dianne, one of the reasons we put this podcast together was to share ideas and tools to prevent and end homelessness from one municipality to another. Knowing municipalities absolutely play a huge part in bringing the National Housing Strategy to life, and understanding many have ways they can support the creation and preservation of affordable housing. I'm hoping maybe you can share with us the tools municipalities have used to encourage the development of affordable housing in their communities.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to have the opportunity to come and speak to you about this, because this is something that CMHC is just starting to work with municipalities, and we've done a lot of research and looked at what's happening across the country, and what we want to bring is what we've seen happening out there with municipalities, what they've been doing, and hopefully, bringing it forward so that other municipalities can learn from each other, right? And moving forward together and working with us and find new ways to work with us, because not all municipalities see themselves as having a role in housing, because that's a federal or provincial responsibility. But there are things that we have seen municipalities do that has really advanced the idea of municipalities of affordable housing. And these generally fall into three categories. You've got your municipalities have access to policy tools, their plans, their strategies. They have access to financial tools, and this is kind of the one everybody thinks of, right? Putting money into affordable housing. Well, municipalities can do that as well. And then there's the whole regulatory side. What are things that can encourage or be barriers to affordable housing? So that's, like your zoning bylaws and your building bylaws and those kind of things can either help or hinder affordable housing. So I think to sort of expand on that, I like to start with it all kind of begins with a plan, and that's policy, and municipalities have the requirement to sort of develop a general plan or an official community plan, depending on what province you're in. And that's a document that you develop with your community. And it's a real opportunity to start at that level, like at your highest policy level, to start talking about the importance of housing and the importance of providing a variety of housing options for people in your community. And that's the document that kind of that you can hang what you do in terms of housing on that document. So if you have strong policy statements from the outset that direct your city and what to do, that's a really good place to start. And that, of course, cascades down to other plans that you can do. And a lot of municipalities are undertaking specifically housing strategies, where they can drill down to the details of what they want to do, identifying additional policies that they can bring to the table, actions they can take. And this is really a great opportunity to bring in other stakeholders in your communities, those that work in the delivery of housing, those that are in the private sector, the public sector, those with lived experience, to all get together and develop the strategy, because that can give you invaluable insight on what you can do. So along with this input and with data, you can start to set targets and support a housing strategy that can involve not just what the municipality can do, but what all of those agencies and all of those stakeholders working in the municipality can do together. So everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction. So I think that's, from a policy perspective, really important. And another piece on policy that maybe some municipalities don't always appreciate is that they have a really strong role as advocates for what they need in their communities, and advocates to us at the federal government as well as to the province. And if you've done the homework and you've got the housing strategy, I think that really builds your case as to if there are gaps that other levels of government aren't addressing, the municipality is in a great position to advocate for any changes that might occur there. So I kind of roll that into one of the policy tools that municipalities have. If we move on to financial tools, there's direct funding, of course. Some municipalities are involved in the direct provision of affordable housing, even though province or territorial government might be involved in it. There's sometimes an arm's length agency from the municipality that actually delivers the housing. But there's also other ways that the city can make direct financial contribution to housing. You can establish a housing fund and then develop your own housing programs where even if it's a minimal contribution, you can contribute to projects in your area. And that is something at CMHC with our National Housing Co-Investment Fund. We are looking for other government partners. So any kind of contribution that a municipality can do makes you a co-investor in the project, right? Another piece is, aside from dollars, there's also land. Municipalities control an awful lot of land. Some of it might be declared surplus. It has a substantial value to a project, and it can help in the viability of any kind of affordable housing project. So that's also what we consider a contribution under National Co-Investment Fund. So you can either donate the land, or maybe you rent it or sell it below market value. That's a significant contribution. Even in some cases, municipalities have, even though the land might be needed in the future, they've allowed for it to be used on a temporary basis, where the affordable housing can be developed on a modular scale and then picked up and moved when the land is needed. So that's another way of thinking outside the box in terms of land. Other thinking outside the box is thinking about co-locating facilities. There's a municipality in BC that is co-locating their city hall with housing. So, sort of city needs a certain amount of land, but they can use the space above it to help develop affordable housing. So that's another interesting contribution. The other pieces are municipalities a lot of times will have revenue that they get from planning applications or development impact fees or those kind of things. Well, there's an opportunity to sort of, maybe because there's a community benefit to having affordable housing, you can waive those fees or property taxes, right? That's a financial contribution that communities can make. And then there's the whole question of regulation. As a planner myself, I know the intricacies of zoning bylaws and those pieces that developers can face. And when we're talking about affordable housing, a lot of the time we're talking about increasing the density in a community, and that will inevitably involve some kind of a zoning bylaw change. Anything municipalities can do to add more flexibility to their zoning bylaws, such as allowing, even slightly higher densities outright, and minimizing the number of steps and the time involved in getting a land prepared and ready for affordable housing is a significant contribution. Time is money, and even, encouraging gentle density, like allowing accessory dwelling units, those secondary suites in an existing single family home. I mean, it helps the homeowner make it more affordable for the homeowner, but it also adds a unit to the affordable rental market, right? Because those suites are generally of more affordable nature. So, things you can do in the regulatory environment is a big contribution to encouraging affordable housing and encouraging supply. There's also incentives that you can take, and we're going to be talking about that in a minute in terms of inclusionary zoning and getting developers to provide affordable housing that way. There's also incentives, like if you're going to develop affordable housing, the municipality can streamline the application process for you. Some of them have like a concierge or a application manager that makes sure that your application doesn't sit too long in anybody's desk, and it kind of weaves through the system as quickly as possible. There's also, and I'm sure you've talked about it on this podcast, in terms of the whole concept of NIMBY, and that getting the public buy-in for a development can take a significant amount of time. And anything a city can do or a municipality can do to prepare the community for changes in density, or to plan for it and make it easier for the project developer to finally come in and there's a community readiness for it, that is a huge barrier that can be that the city and the municipality can assist with. And one last thing too, in terms of a regulatory tool, is it's important for municipalities not to forget and not to dismiss the fact that they have affordable housing already, something we call naturally occurring affordable housing. It's those older buildings that are renting, lower than the average out there. And there are policies that you can put in place to protect those kind of buildings, or if they're being replaced, you have replacement policies to make sure that the number of units themselves are not lost at that rental rate. There's also something as simple as enforcing your building and maintenance laws on a regular basis so that the properties remain in good repair and safe for tenants. And you sort of stem that idea that, you're encouraging timely repairs by the property owners, and you don't have that demolition by neglect that can happen, or that they, fall into such disrepair they're either unsafe for the tenant or the building gets boarded up entirely, right? So, there's, little things like that that can, protect what you already have. So that kind of, I guess, sums up the different tools that we've looked at and we've seen out there in municipalities on how they are working in that affordable housing sector and helping the other levels of government in this area.
For sure. Well, thank you for helping us wrap our heads around all of that. Those are really great tools. Yeah, no, it's great, and I think it's really important context. So now that you've sort of stepped us through that, I was wondering if you could walk us through or talk about some examples across the country, such as Montreal's 20-20-20 inclusionary zoning initiative, and progressive regulations such as Edmonton's open option parking.
Right. Yeah, I mentioned inclusionary zoning, and Montreal actually just this past April has enacted one of the most unique inclusionary zoning bylaws I've seen. They've it's evolved from 20-20-20, and it's now for a métropole mixte, or what do they call it? A diverse metropolis. So they're looking at a three-pronged approach in Montreal, which is really interesting. There's a requirement that new housing developments have 20% of their housing set aside for social housing. So here they would partner with a social housing agency, and either through a turnkey or through providing land or perhaps a payment in lieu, but there's a commitment to have 20% of developed units be for social housing. So not the affordable side, but even more deeply affordable in terms of social, and that would be working with a social housing provider in the province. Then there's requirements around affordable housing. Here they had, in some cases, it's 20%, but it ranges from 10 to 20, and it's for specific areas of Montreal where they're 10 to 20% of the units should be available at affordable rental levels. And the affordability definition kind of meshes with our affordability definitions in terms of co-investment and our rental construction financing initiative. So there's some meshing that can happen there with our programs as well. And then another interesting piece, and this is in recognition that there's a lot of multifamily housing being built, but not necessarily fitting who needs it. And they are requiring that on large projects that have at least 50 units, that 20% of the units be geared towards families. So with 3 bedrooms or more. So that's another unique aspect of this requirement. So it has just gone in place in April. So we'll be watching to see what impact that has on the market and what impact it has on the availability of housing. So that's been really interesting to watch. I know Toronto right now is looking at a revamp of their inclusionary zoning bylaw. So anybody in Toronto should take a look at what's going on there. So I think it's something that's starting to spread and getting a lot of interest out there. Despite it being around for a long time, there's new ways of looking at it, and Montreal's mixed metropolis is kind of one of those. Another aspect, you mentioned open option parking in Edmonton, and that's another example of relaxing some of the development regulations where Edmonton is leaving it up to the developer to decide how much parking they should provide on site. So if you're building a building, especially if you're a affordable housing provider and you're close to transit, you might not necessarily want to give up a lot of your lot to parking because people don't necessarily need cars, or people maybe can't afford cars, or if they're near transit, they don't need a car, and they can actually devote some of that money for more towards housing or towards family expenses. So that's because a car is a big expense. So the open option parking kind of leaves that open to the developer. So nonprofits could now develop more of their lots. I see it as being perhaps an opportunity for existing nonprofits who have housing and a parking lot adjacent. Well, maybe now they can expand on it because there's no longer that requirement that they provide parking. So that's and it's interesting. So it's and it's not taking away from any developer that wants to provide parking. They can still go ahead and do that, because in certain markets, if you don't have a parking spot, you can't sell the unit. That that's entirely their decision, and it leaves it to the developer. It's an interesting way to do it.
It's I'm fascinated by this. You talked about the tools. You've given us some examples of those, and at Blue Door, we're looking at developing a site, the parking piece, the development charge, all those different pieces from the municipal end of things will play into it. And I remember a long time ago talking with Adam Vaughan. He said, "Look, for us to really move our national housing strategy ahead, we need all three levels of government to play a part in that." And so, on that note, I was hoping you could talk about how these tools you've talked about can complement the national housing strategy programs and act as a contribution to projects under the National Housing Co-Investment Fund.
Okay. As I mentioned, anything that a municipality does that saves time, saves money, is a contribution to the project. We see that as fulfilling the requirement for our program to have a co-investor, and the city becomes now a partner in the project. And one of the interesting things we've done in terms of working closely with cities is in Calgary, we've actually gotten together on a memorandum of understanding to share our experience and our knowledge, where Calgary every couple of years has a policy where they put their surplus land up for a request for proposal, and every couple of years they put it out to nonprofits, so at a discounted rate. So their surplus land is available for nonprofits to bid on. Now, with their request for proposal process, they've actually partnered with CMHC, and what they ask in their request for proposals is exactly the same kind of information we ask for in our National Housing Co-Investment Fund application process, so that the person who's bidding on the piece of land is gathering that information once. Right, so that they're now kind of ready to come to us. Now, to further that partnership, the City of Calgary, who are great experts in knowing what's going to fit in their communities and what the housing need is and what projects are kind of going to fit, you add that to CMHC's expertise in underwriting projects with the financial aspects of it that the city doesn't necessarily have. With the two of us get together and we review what's come in the request for proposals, and we are thereby able to pick the best projects that are going to have the most success with our program, and therefore the most success within the City of Calgary. So it's really a great example where we have complementary skill sets that kind of work together, and their programs work with our programs very closely. And I think that's something that there's similar things happening in other municipalities. We are open to finding creative ways to work together where we can have our skill sets complement each other in that way.
I love it. I mean, listen, we need creativity. We need innovation. It's so nice to hear that all levels of government are open to that, and we need them to be so. Listen, this has been so informative and impactful. Where can people go to find out more information on the work you're doing, or on some of those tools, get more information, dig a little deeper?
Well, for sure, our website is a great tool, cmhc.ca. We also have a specific website for the National Housing Strategy, which is place to call home. .ca, not a place to call home. You'll get a British sitcom if you go to a place to call home. It's a place to call home .com.
Awesome.
Well, that's great. And yeah, Dianne, thank you so much again for making the time to join us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, Steph, I am so excited to dig in all these different things. Often what holds us back sometimes from planning is not having the knowledge around the policy pieces, the financial pieces that might be there, the regulatory pieces too. Like I found that fascinating. And we have a small house and a big piece of land in the city of Newmarket that we own. We're working with Habitat, see if we can redevelop that and the town of Newmarket. And of course, we'll be coming to CMHC for some support in that too, to do some mix. We could take a small house with 5 bedrooms and actually perhaps do 13 units of 3 bedrooms, right? Just create a lot of mixed use housing there. So this is selfishly very
informative.
It was so interesting. But also I think many of our listeners too, to understand this and use these tools and find out more about them, because this is what's going to push us forward in the development of affordable housing and preventing and ending homelessness.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know I reference this all the time, but, back in the day when I was a city reporter, covering rezoning applications and just having to learn the planning language for cities was quite the undertaking. And I was a city reporter for several Lower Mainland cities, and it definitely fluctuates from city to city. They all have their own kinks and ways of doing business, and I just think it's how we can find that common ground and innovate and find solutions is, I think, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, in York Region and stuff, we have 9 municipalities, all very different. And we'll have a developer or someone say, I'd rather not work in, because
right.
of,
Yes.
and Dianne, with that, like the planning, might be slower or different or don't have all these things in place. Say, but over here, you should work with so-and-so in this town.
Totally.
They're great, and they really get it. They want to push things forward, right? Everyone's coming on board eventually as these new tools are made available. But you're so right. From place to place, it is different. We got some great examples of where it's working today. So let's all take a hard listen to this podcast and share it widely, because, hey, this is going to be helpful in pushing that national housing strategy forward, don't you think?
I do, yeah. Well, Michael, another great episode, so I guess I'll see you next week.
We will see you then.